Hello and welcome to Spinster's Library. I'm Claudia and today I want to recommend 5 classics that you might enjoy if you're a fan of young adult fiction. I've seen lists like this before and I'm often a bit disappointed with the books that are recommended to YA readers. They usually include titles like To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee or The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett, which are all great books of course, but you can tell they only made the list because they're either classics written for children or classics featuring child protagonists. Obviously there's more to YA fiction than a child protagonist. In fact, most young adult fiction doesn't feature child protagonists at all. And as much as I love a good children's classic, that's not what I think about when I think about classics for YA readers. But rather I think about books that, as the name suggests, explore the lives of young adults. YA is about people at a crucial point in their lives where childhood is left behind, where decisions are being made, and identities are discovered. Anyway, since I'm most definitely preaching to the choir here, let's get right into the recommendations. Here are 5 classics from the 19th and 20th centuries that explore those very same themes, but that were published long before YA became a thing. The first book I want to recommend is The Chrysalids by John Wyndham. This is a dystopian novel published in 1955, and it's set in a far future in a world shaped by the effects of nuclear fallout. We follow a boy named David through his adolescence as he tries to navigate life in a strict fundamentalist society that persecutes anyone who deviates from what they consider the norm. It's a strict Christianity-based religion that severely punishes any form of otherness, using anything from shunning to straight-up eugenics to control the community. David's father is a preacher, a community leader, an authority figure, and his life is therefore dominated by work and prayer. The community itself is rural, sustaining themselves on agriculture. Basically, it's your typical far future survivalist setting where a bad harvest or an attack by raiders can mean absolute destruction. You get the idea. But because growing up in a strictly regulated and at the same time quite violent world isn't enough, David also has a secret to hide. He and a few other young people in the neighborhood were born with the ability to communicate telepathically. But as this too falls outside the biblically defined norm, they need to hide this gift from everyone else or risk drawing the wrath of the religious order. To me, and I'm sure to you as well, this synopsis sounds like one of the many young adult dystopias that populated the bookshops 15-20 years ago. We often think of The Hunger Games as the book that invented the whole young adult dystopia genre, with its storytelling tropes and conventions. But if you're my age or older, you'll remember that by the time The Hunger Games came out, the genre was already gaining popularity, it was already in full swing. Growing up, I adored Scott Westerfeld's Uglies series, for example, from the early 2000s, but you can go further back into the 90s and look at something like Lois Lowry's The Giver and its sequels. The Chrysalids was published half a century even before that. And yet it has those exact same vibes, those exact same literary notes as all of those later YA dystopias. Just like those, it uses a far future setting as an allegory to tackle issues that were relevant to the contemporary reader. The post-nuclear war premise very much speaks to mid-century Cold War fears and worries, but the subjects of family and community, of religion and individualism, of sexual freedom and identity. All the good things that we love about YA dystopia are very much present in this novel. If this has made you curious, I actually recorded a full spoiler-free review of The Chrysalids, which I'll link down below. For the next recommendation, we go back all the way to the Victorian age, in particular to the genre of vampire novels, which kind of existed in the 18th century but really became popular in the second half of the 19th century. I am of course talking about Carmilla by Sheridan Le Fanu, which was published in 1872. I think I might have just mistakenly called it a novel, but really it is a novella. It's a very quick read, but it already contains all the things we love about the genre of the vampire story. It's spooky, it's mysterious, it's dark, and it's a bit gay. Camilla is set in a vaguely Switzerland-coded country in Central Europe, where 19-year-old Laura lives in a creepy old castle with only her father and her 2 governesses. One day, a passing carriage turns over right in front of them, and a beautiful young woman tumbles out, evidently injured. Laura's father agrees to take her in and let her recuperate at the family's castle, while her mother is off on an apparently very urgent journey. Laura and the young woman, whose name is, you guessed it, Camilla, get very close indeed. At the same time, a series of unexplained deaths is sweeping the countryside, an epidemic that seemingly befalls only young women. And at the castle, too, mysterious things begin to happen. Are you a mysterious thing? Minerva has been in so many of my videos lately, I really feel like I should write her a contract or something. What? I know you want attention, but I am, in fact, in the middle of something. So why don't you just sit there and look adorable, and then I'll give you all the fuss you want later. Where even was I? Camilla. It's like the blueprint of classic vampire stories. If you're at all familiar with the genre, and even I, who am not really familiar with the genre, but you know exactly how the story plays out. I personally love reading early examples of genres, kind of the stories that set up, that establish tropes and storytelling conventions, like these genre markers, the things that give a book shape and put it in a particular category. I love exploring those very early examples of those. What I'm saying is that the plot of Camilla is somewhat predictable, but the book is still extremely fun to read. It's also one of those books where the context of the period in which it was written matters. In particular, when it comes to the establishment of the lesbian vampire trope. Something that, at least according to Wikipedia, became a thing in early cinema. I've got to admit, I'm not particularly well versed in early cinema, not a fan of black and white movies, so I'm just going to take Wikipedia's word for it. But anyway, this is the book that started the lesbian vampire trope. And from a Victorian morality point of view, it's easy to see why the author, who I feel like it's almost needless to say at this point was a man, made this connection between vampires and sexy ladies seducing innocent young women. The Victorians were famously obsessed with the taboo and the macabre, and books like Camilla are an effect of that. The vampire is a lesbian not because lesbian vampires are fun, but because both were considered symptoms of moral depravity by the author. Definitely something to bear in mind if you read it. But still enjoyable as what it is, which is a creepy but camp early example of vampire fiction in general and the lesbian vampire trope in particular. With the next recommendation, we're sticking to Victorian literature with a book that I don't talk about too often, though I have also made a separate review video for that, which you'll find linked down below. I'm talking about Agnes Grey by Anne Bronte. Anne Bronte only ever wrote 2 novels, which is a shame because she is objectively the best Bronte sister. Her other book, The Tenant of Wildfell Hall, is an absolute favourite of mine and one that I'll never tire of recommending. But in this video, for this list, I want to talk about Agnes Grey, which was published in 1847. Like many books of the time, this one is about a governess trying to find her place in the world and, ideally, finding a husband while she's at it. The main character, Anne, is a young woman who grew up in an unfortunate family situation. Unlike many other Victorian heroines, though, she is not an orphan, but rather the daughter of an upper-class woman who married below her station, meaning she married a clergyman with little money. That means that Anne and her sister grow up very modestly, but also are very sheltered. So she decides to apply for a position as a governess to make a bit of money for the family, but also to get out from under their protective wing. Anyone who did any babysitting in their teenage years will know exactly what follows. The children turn out to be absolute nightmares, yet somehow not as bad as their parents. Agnes is a naturally very calm and quiet young woman, and she struggles to assert herself in difficult situations. She tries to do the right thing, but on several occasions that gets her in trouble. Slowly, she finds her feet and learns to go her own way. Also, there's a hot, conveniently single priest. Of course there is. This is Victorian literature after all. This is a book for readers who like their novels slow and their protagonists gentle. It's not a long novel by any means, it's only about 200 pages, but it's a very low action plot, quite different from the high drama that we know from other Bronte novels like Wuthering Heights or Jane Eyre, or even Anne Bronte's other novel, The Tenant of Wildfell Hall. Agnes Grey still has a lot going for it, and if you enjoy a quiet, calmer story about a young woman growing into herself, I think you'll get a lot out of this one. The next book is one that I've spoken about in so many recommendations videos. I'm almost embarrassed to bring it up yet again, but honestly it fits this list so perfectly. I just couldn't leave it off it. The book I'm talking about is I Capture the Castle by Dodie Smith, which was published in 1948, almost exactly 100 years after the previous recommendation, because we like a bit of variety here. This is another absolute favorite of mine, and it's perfect for this time of year if you're watching this video as it comes out in March anyway. I always think of I Capture the Castle as a spring and summer book. This is a diary novel that follows the life of 17-year-old Cassandra, who has ambitions to become a writer, just like her father. She lives in an old castle ruin in the English countryside with her father, who's been trying to break through his writer's block for years, her glamorous and eccentric stepmother Topaz, and her older sister Rose, who's getting fed up of the family's financial situation. This is the archetypal weird family dynamic, and Cassandra's diary entries describe it in delightful and hilarious detail. The family's constant struggle for money, while at the same time trying to save face in society. Posh people problems, basically. Then there's the two daughters' absolute boredom at being so shut off from everything. But things are shaken up by the arrival of two handsome American brothers who inherit a nearby stately manor. Cassandra and Rose, who have read Jane Austen and know what happens next, try their hardest to make sure their rich new neighbours are their ticket out of their unfortunate situation. This is such a fun novel. It's very self-aware, it's light-hearted, it's funny, but with moments of depth and serenity. It's a truly beautifully written and very nuanced look at family and sisterhood and romance, but also at wealth and class and how all those things interact to make human relationships a lot more complicated than they first appear. It's also a book about growing up, and it has that weird, undefinable sense of nostalgia. A fake nostalgia, really, for a life that I and most other readers of this book never really experience. It's a wonderful novel if you enjoy YA books that deal with the complexities of growing up, of being an adult in a world that still sees you as a child. And we've already gotten to my final recommendation, which actually touches on some of those same themes, but is also much, much darker. I'm talking about Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, which was published in 1938. This is often described as an early thriller, but I think it's much harder to categorize this book into one particular genre. It's creepy and dark and gothic, but also quite slow-paced, with an ever-present sense of dread that makes it an absolute page-turner despite that slow pace. The protagonist and first-person narrator is a young woman whose name and background we don't really know. At the beginning of the book, she gets married to the older and much richer Maxim de Winter, who's an old money type with an enormous family estate in rural Cornwall. The protagonist moves there without really knowing what she's gotten herself into, and finds that not only is the house enormous, remote, and very old indeed, she also finds that it's almost haunted by the presence of Maxim's first wife, Rebecca, who died young and under mysterious circumstances. This is not a book about the supernatural. There's no literal ghost of Rebecca haunting Manderley, but Maxim's past with her is everywhere. The protagonist has to deal with her new husband's emotional distance, which seems to be caused by his attachment to his first wife. But it's also the rest of the house that seems to be hostile to the protagonist. There's a creepy housekeeper who likes to play mind games with her. There's the traces of Rebecca in every room of the house. The protagonist cannot escape Rebecca. And so she finds herself in a very lonely position, trying to navigate that, while at the same time desperate to find out what actually happened to Rebecca and whether she too might be in danger. Rebecca is a BookTube favorite for a reason. Despite being nearly 90 years old, there is something about it that just grabs your attention. It's such a compelling book. It grabs you right on the first page and doesn't let go. There's the whole psychological thriller aspect, but it's also combined with this theme of having to grow up fast, of the daunting realities of adulthood, and the sheer horror of responsibility, as well as the ever-enchanting Cornwall setting. There is the whole Byronic love interest with a twist. The twist being, of course, that the protagonist starts off married to the tall, dark, handsome, and very moody man. There's so much to like about Rebecca. So if you're into gothic romances, psychological thrillers, or just a good old-fashioned mystery, I think you're going to like that one. So these were my 5 recommendations for classics you might enjoy if you're a fan of YA. If you're new here, do check out my other videos in which I talk about classics, which is, to be fair, most of them. But a good place to start might be a recent video essay I did in which I try and address the question, what actually is a classic? Thank you so much for watching. Bye!